Hey everyone, it's Megan here from Meghan Makes Do, and today I'm going to be showing you how to knit your very own Cali Cover Up. Links to the full written pattern on my blog is available in the description below. Let's go ahead and get started. For today's tutorial, we are using Lion Brand's Oh Baby Organic in the color Tan. Depending on what size you need will depend on how many skeins you will need. I will be making the large, extra large 2X size, and we're going to need about 8 skeins of this yarn. I'm also going to be using a 4mm, a US size 6. So I'm using circular knitting needles. You can also use straights. It's totally up to you. It's just a matter of preference here, but you'll need either 4mm knitting needles or whatever size you need to meet the gauge that is listed in the pattern. You'll also need a few stitch markers, which I have here, and later on when we're binding off, you will need a small crochet hook. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so if you're following along with the written pattern, I highly recommend doing that, especially if you're making a different size than the size that I'm going to be making. So like I said before, I'm making the size large, extra large 2X. There are only 3 sizes of this, so if you're making the smaller size, which is extra small through medium, or if you're making the larger size, which is 3X through 5X, I recommend either pulling up the blog post for the free version or go ahead and buy the PDF and print that out, and you can follow along with the video tutorial. So again, they're basically going to be very similar. We're just going to be doing either more or less repeats of the panels. But we're going to go ahead and using a long tail cast on, you're either going to cast on 63, 83, or 103 stitches. So I'm again making the middle size, so I am going to be putting 83 stitches onto my needles. So go ahead and cast on for the number of stitches that you will need for whatever size you are making. And again, you can find links to the blog post where the free version is, as well as links to the PDF that you can print out in my shop. Or if you want to go ahead and get all the yarn that you need as well, you can buy a complete kit from Lion Brand Yarn, which includes a free digital copy of the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and finish casting on my 83 stitches, and then I will meet you back here. Okay, so I've got my 83 stitches on, so make sure that you have the right number of stitches for whatever size you'll be making, and go ahead and grab your stitch markers so that you're ready for where we have to place them. So for row 1, we are going to start, and I should preface that either side of our piece, we're actually going to be making a small I-cord edging. So the first 2 and the last 2 stitches are going to be worked slightly differently depending on what row you're working on. So for row 1, we are going to slip the first stitch with the yarn in back. We're going to slip it purlwise, and then we are going to knit 19 stitches. This is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and then 19. Okay. So now we want to use the stitch markers to mark where our dropped stitch is going to be. So our panels are made up of like a lace with a V-stitch lace panel, and then in between each V-stitch lace panel we're going to have a purposely dropped stitch, and that's going to become part of our design. And so we want to mark that stitch with our stitch marker so that we know that on either side of that drop stitch we're always going to be knitting through the back loop to get those twisted stitches in there to lock in our drop stitch. So my next stitch, I am going to knit through the back loop. Oh my goodness, it's a little bit tricky here on the cast on row. So I'm knitting through the back loop. So knit one through the back loop, and then I'm going to place a stitch marker. The next stitch, I'm just going to knit as normal. This will be the stitch that I'm going to drop eventually. So the first one before that stitch, I knit through the back loop, and now the next stitch, I'm going to knit through the back loop. So what I've done is I've knit one through the back loop, placed my marker, knit one through the back loop. Now I'm going to knit 17. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Then I'm going to knit one through the back loop. Again, place a marker, knit the next stitch as normal, and then knit one through the back loop again. Okay, so if you are making the smaller size, you would not do another repeat of that, but if you are making the large, extra large 2X, we're going to repeat that. So the knit 17, knit one through the back loop, place a marker, knit one, knit through the back loop one more time. If you're making the 3X through 5X, you're going to repeat that process 2 more times. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that one more time, and then I'll show you how to do the last few stitches on your row. Okay, so I've repeated that one more time, and now I'm going to continue knitting until I have 2 stitches left. So no matter what size you're on, once you finish your repeats, you want to knit until you have 2 stitches remaining. All right, so now we have 2 stitches remaining, and what we're going to do is we're going to slip the next stitch off purlwise, bring our yarn in the front, and purl the last stitch. Okay, so that's the end of row 1. Now for row 2, we are going to start by slipping our first stitch off purlwise with the yarn in back, just like that. And then we're going to bring our yarn to the front and we're going to purl all the way across, making sure to slip our stitch markers as we go until we have 2 stitches remaining. And this is how we are going to work all of our even numbered rows. We're always going to slip the first stitch off purlwise with yarn in back, bring our yarn to the front, and then purl across until we have 2 stitches remaining, making sure to always slip our markers as we go. We want to make sure that we're keeping track of where our dropped stitch is going to be. Okay, so I've purled all the way across until I have 2 stitches remaining. And then with my yarn still in front, I'm going to slip the next stitch off purlwise and then go ahead and purl the last stitch. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to repeat those 2 rows one more time. So repeat rows 1 and 2, so do your knit row and your purl row, making sure that you're using the proper slipping of the row of the stitches. So slip your first stitch and then your second to last stitch, and make sure that you're always purling the last stitch of every row. So repeat rows 1 and 2, and then I'll meet you back here and I'll show you how to do the 6 row repeat with our lace panels. Okay, so now for rows 5 through 10, we're going to be doing a 6 row repeat, and we're gonna be making like a lacy V-stitch and then some more eyelet stitches here. And we're gonna be doing that over and over again in between these stitch markers. So I'm gonna pull a finished panel over so you can kind of see what we're going to be creating here. So this one is, and I've already dropped this stitch. So this is my first knit through the back loop stitch, my regular knit stitch, which I dropped, and then my knit through the back loop. So here you can see we have these 17 stitches in here is what we're going to be working on in between the markers. So we're gonna start with that and then repeat that. You'll either have 3, 4, or 5 of these V-stitch sections along your panel. And so it's just a 6 row repeat, creating this V here, and then these little pillars right here of eyelets. So for row 5, again, remember we're making an I-cord edge along either side of our work. So again, with the yarn in the back, we're going to slip the first stitch purlwise, and then we are going to knit the next 2 stitches. Okay, then we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, and then we're going to what is called SKPO. So we're going to slip 1 knitwise, knit 1, and then we're going to take that slipped stitch and pull it over the knit stitch. Okay, then we're going to knit 3, and we're going to yarn over and do the slip knit pull over again. So slip 1 purlwise, knit the next stitch, and then take that slipped stitch with your left needle and pull it over, almost like you're binding off, just like that. Then we're going to knit 2, okay, and then we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, oh shoot, okay, so after our knit 2 together, we're going to yarn over, knit the next one, yarn over, and then we're going to do a slip knit pull over, SKPO, where we slip the next stitch knitwise, and then we knit the following stitch, and then we go back with our left needle and we pick up that slipped stitch and pull it over the knit stitch, kind of like a bind off, just like that. Then we're going to knit 3, 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to make, we just made, these are like our eyelet columns that we're starting over here, where you knit 2 together, knit 1 with the yarn overs in between. So now we're going to yarn over and do the slip knit pull over again. So slip 1 as if to knit the next stitch, and then take that slipped stitch and pull it over the knit one and let it go. Then we're going to knit 2, and now we're going to do another one of our eyelet columns here. So we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and then slip, knit, pull over. Okay, so now we're 1 before our stitch marker, so we're going to knit this stitch through the back loop, slip our stitch marker, knit our next stitch as normal, and then knit another one through the back loop. Okay, and then we get to repeat the process again. So in between here, we're going to repeat what we already did. So I'll show you again. We're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, pull over, knit 3, yarn over, slip, knit, and then pull that slip stitch over your knit stitch. Knit 2, 1, 2, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, pull over, and we're back to the one before our stitch marker. So again, knit 1 through the back loop, slip your marker, knit 1 as normal, and then knit the next one through the back loop. And now we're ready to do our lacy section again. So I'm going to repeat that again, and then I'm going to be at my stitch marker. I'll knit through the back loop of this one, slip the marker, knit as normal, knit through the back loop, and I'll come back here and I will stop when I have 2 stitches left on my needle. So again, make sure that you're paying attention to the number of times that you need to repeat things by looking at the written pattern either on the blog or in the PDF. So I'll meet you back here when we have 2 stitches left of row 5. Okay, so I just finished my last slip knit pullover. I'm going to knit 1, and now I have 2 stitches left. So I'm going to slip the next stitch with the yarn in back. I'm going to slip it purlwise, bring my yarn to the front, and knit the last stitch. Okay, so that's the end of row 5. I'm going to turn, and then we just repeat row 2, which is our purl row. So with the yarn in back, I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise, bring my yarn in front, and purl all the way across until my last 2 stitches remain. So we're just going to repeat row 2, and then I'll meet you back here and show you how to work row 7. Okay, so now we're ready to do row 7, and you can kind of start to see here all the holes that we will be making. So again, we're going to, with the yarn in the back, slip the first stitch purlwise, and then we're going to knit 2. So 1, 2, and again, keeping with these columns here of eyelets, we are going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit the next stitch, yarn over, and then again slip, knit, and pull over. Okay, now we're just going to knit 1. Okay, and this is the bottom of our V, so this is our first hole. We're going to make 2 holes here now. So we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit the next one, yarn over, and then slip, knit, pull over. Then we're going to knit 1, and we're back to our next column of eyelets. So we will knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, pull over. Okay, so now we're at 1 before our stitch marker. So again, knit through the back loop, slip your marker, knit the next stitch as normal, and then knit through the back loop. Okay, and so now we're back to another eyelet column. We're going to kind of repeat what we did before. So we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, pull over, knit 1, and again, here's the bottom of our lacy V. This is the hole, so we're going to make 1 on either side of that hole. So we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and then again another slip, knit, pull over, knit 1, and we're back to our next column of eyelets. So knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, and pull that slip stitch over. Then again, knit through the back loop, slip your marker, stay in the front, knit the next stitch, and knit through the back loop. And we're back to our next eyelet column. So we're just going to repeat that all the way until we have 3 stitches left on our needle. Okay, so I've got 3 stitches left here. The last stitch of my repeat, I'm just knitting 1, and then I'm going to slip the next stitch purlwise, bring my yarn in front, and purl my last stitch. And then I'm ready to repeat my row 2 again. Okay, so we're ready to start row 9, and here you can see a little bit clearer. Here are our columns of eyelets, and then here is the start of our V here. So for row 9, we're again going to start by slipping the first stitch purlwise, and then knitting 2, so 1, 2, and then again following the same pattern as before for our eyelet columns, we knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and then slip, knit, pull over. Okay, now we're not going to do any knit stitches in between. We're just going to go right back to a knit 2 together, yarn over, then we're going to knit 3, yarn over, and again slip, knit, pull over, and we're back to our eyelet column. So we're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, pull over. And then we're to 1 before our stitch marker, so we're going to knit through the back loop, slip our stitch marker, knit the next one as normal, and then knit 1 through the back loop. Okay, and now we're back to an eyelet column. So again, I'll show you this one more time. We're going to knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, and then pull that slip stitch over. Okay, and now we're gonna do the little V-stitch section. So knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 3, 1, 2, 3, yarn over, slip, knit, pull over, and we're to our next column of eyelets. So again, knit 2 together, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, slip, knit, pull over, and then we're going to knit through the back loop, slip our marker, knit 1, and knit 1 through the back loop. And again, we repeat that process again until we have 3 stitches remaining. Okay, so I've got the 3 stitches remaining. I knit that last stitch, and then again, slip the next stitch purlwise, bring your yarn in front, and purl the last stitch. And then we're going to turn and repeat row 2 again, and that's your row 10. Okay, so I just finished row 10, which is a row 2 repeat, and now you can see we're on the right side again, and we've completed a V in lace and these 2 eyelet columns here. We've got our stitch markers just before where our drop stitch will be, and we're just going to repeat those 6 rows over and over again until you've gotten to the right amount of repeats. So for my size, which is the large, extra large 2X, we're going to make sure that we have 68 of these V's. And the reason why it's so much is because we're making continuous panels that will be your front and back, but we're making 2 of them and then we're going to seam them together. So go ahead and repeat rows 5 through 10, which is this little section here, minus the stockinette stitches, for the total number of repeats listed for your size. And then we'll come back here and I will show you how to finish off your last few rows, and then I'll show you how to bind off, and that's when we'll have the fun bit of dropping these stitches where our markers are. So go ahead and do all of your repeats, enjoy your knitting, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I've just finished up my 68 pattern repeats, and now we're ready to do our last finishing rows before we bind off and get ready to drop these stitches. So we are going to do a row of knit stitches, but we're always going to start the same. So I'm going to slip the first stitch off purlwise, and then I'm going to knit all the stitches across until I get to my last 2 stitches. So these last few rows are just kind of like our beginning rows where we're doing some stockinette stitches. But again, with these rows, just as we have been with all of our previous rows, our right side rows, we are going to be knitting through the back loop in the stitch before and after our marked drop stitch. Okay, so we have our stitch marker here. So this last stitch before the stitch marker, I'm going to knit through the back loop, slip my marker, knit the next stitch. This is going to be our drop stitch, and then knit through the back loop of the stitch after. And then I'm just going to continue to knit across until I have 2 stitches remaining. But again, each time you get to your stitch marker, make sure that you are knitting through the back loop of the stitch before the stitch marker, knit the next stitch, and then knit through the back loop again. Okay, so I have 2 stitches left, and just like we did, this is basically a repeat of rows 1 and 2. We are going to slip the next stitch off purlwise, bring our yarn in front, and purl our last stitch of the row. And then we're going to turn our work, and we're going to repeat row 2, which again, start by slipping your first stitch off purlwise with the yarn in the back. Then bring your yarn to the front, and we are going to purl all the way across until 2 stitches remain. And just make sure that you slip your stitch markers as you go, but we will not be doing any twisted stitches. So again, this is just like row 2 when we first started. So I'm going to continue to purl all the way across until I have 2 stitches remaining. Okay, so I've gotten to my last 2 stitches, and I'm going to slip the next stitch off purlwise and then purl my last stitch to complete my row. All right, and then we're going to turn again, and you're just going to repeat those 2 rows one more time. So do your knit row and then your purl row, and then we'll come back here and I'll show you how to bind off, and we're going to do the little bit scary part where we're going to drop this stitch right here. Okay, so finish up another repeat of rows 1 and 2, and then I'll meet you back here to bind off. Okay, so I've just finished another repeat of rows 1 and 2, and I am ready to bind off. What you're going to need that can be helpful here is a small crochet hook. I just have a size F, which is a 3.75 millimeter. It's relatively small, and we're going to need this just to make some extra chain stitches here where we're going to drop these stitches where the markers are. So we're going to start binding off just as we normally would. So I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches, and then I'm going to use my left needle and pick up the stitch on the right and pull it over the stitch on the left and off. And then I'm going to knit the next stitch. So anytime I have 2 stitches on my right needle, I'm going to take the right stitch and pull it over the left, just like this. And I'm going to continue to bind off stitches until I've gotten to the stitch marker. Okay, so we're almost to our marker here. Okay, so now I can take my marker out, and here's the part that may seem a little scary, but it's actually pretty fun. What we're going to do is we are going to drop this stitch, and we're just going to let it start to kind of come out so that we know how wide this space is, and eventually we're going to pull on this and we're going to let this stitch drop all the way down to the end. Okay, so these horizontal lines here are going to become a part of our design. So we need to finish continuing to bind off the rest of our stitches, but we want to make sure that we're keeping this space here. So that's where our crochet hook comes in handy. So I'm going to slip this loop here onto my crochet hook. I'm just going to kind of pull this out a little bit so those stitches don't drop off. And then I'm going to make a few chains. So let's start with 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And kind of lay that across and see if that is enough so that we get the same amount of space going across as this here. So that 4, it looks pretty good. I think we might just need 4. So this can take a little bit of adjusting. You want to kind of keep your chains somewhat loose because you want them to match the width of your dropped stitch going across. So I think I might chain 1 more and do 5 just to be on the safe side. Okay, so 4 or 5 chains should be good. Now I can take my hook out and put this loop back onto my right needle, and then I'm just going to continue to bind off until I get to my next marked stitch. So I'm going to knit this next stitch, and then I'm going to go ahead and slip that off to bind it off. And again, it might get kind of loose right there until you finish binding everything off, but we're going to continue to bind off a couple more stitches, and then I can show you what it will look like when you're done. Okay, so let's go back and look here. You can see that where our chains are, it's a nice, I think those 5 stitches worked really well. So 5 chain stitches up here, just so we have a nice clean edge here and we're not getting this kind of look here. We don't want that. And when I'm all done binding off, we'll go ahead and we'll make sure that we get this drop stitch to go all the way down. But for now, let's continue to bind off until we get to our next marked stitch. So just continue to bind off as you normally would. Okay, so now again, take our stitch marker off, and this next stitch, we're just going to pull it off and let it go. We're going to drop it. Okay, so again, let's pull these out a little bit. You're going to take the right needle out of the loop and stick your crochet hook in, and we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put our loop right back onto our right needle, and then we're going to continue binding off. So again, knit the next stitch and then bind it off, and keep going until you've reached our last stitch marker, or this may be your last stitch marker depending on what size you're making, or you may have one more than me. Because again, remember that this cover up comes in 3 sizes. But you'll just continue to bind off as normal, dropping those stitches where the marker is, the stitch right after the marker, that's the one you drop. And then just make sure that you're chaining 5 chains across that drop stitch so you get a nice even edge. And then we're just going to continue to bind off as normal. I'll drop my last stitch until I'm all done, and then we can fasten off and we can continue to make those stitches drop all the way down our panel. So continue to bind off, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll continue dropping those stitches together. Okay, so I've bound off my panel and I'm making the size large, extra large 2X, so I have 3 rows of or 3 spaces of drop stitches. So what you gotta do is just kind of keep pulling along either side of the drop stitch to kind of just get it all to come out. So you don't have to pull too hard on this, and we're just going to keep going all the way down our panel, and it'll drop all the way to the end. And then because we were going all the way down, that's why I had us do the knit through the back loop. It kind of twists those stitches and locks them in, so you know that it won't start unraveling any more of your pattern. So since these panels are fairly long, it can take a little bit of time to get your drop stitches all the way down, but we just continue to give it a little tug. And I just want to show you what it will look like at the bottom of your piece. But I think this gives it such a really cool detail here, and it looks so nice with our lacy panel stitches here. Oh my goodness, I cannot wait to block this thing and get it all ready. It's gonna look so good. I still have to make the second panel, obviously, and then we'll seam it together, but you can already start blocking this panel that you've already finished, and then we'll go ahead and we'll make a second panel, and then I'll show you how to seam them together. So we're just gonna drop all of the stitches, depending on what size you have. You'll have anywhere from 2 to 4 drop stitches to take out. Go almost to the end here. It's gonna go all the way down. This last one is a little bit tricky. Okay, so that's what it will look like at the end. You'll kind of have these really long chain stitches, but see how they just stretches the length of the drop stitch, and that's why we did the chains while we were doing the bind off, so that we again have this long length here at the top as well. Oh, I am so in love with how this turned out. Oh my goodness. So just go ahead and finish dropping all of your stitches. And like I said, repeat this process again until you have a second panel, and then block both your panels, and we'll come back and we'll seam this baby together, and you will be ready for summer. So you can see here, I have my panels pinned down onto my blocking mats, and I have steam blocked my panels. They're ready to go. It really helps to open up the lace stitches and get those drop stitches to lay a little bit straighter as well. So once you are done blocking, let's go ahead and seam these panels together. So I've taken out the pins, I'm ready to seam, I've lined up my panels, and I'm making sure that this part is the front. My V's are going this way, and I'm going to seam up until a certain point. That's where like the V neck of my neckline is going to be. And then this stitch marker is marking the back panel. So on the back panel, your V's are going to be going the opposite way, kind of pointing up or down depending on which way you have them. So I'm going to seam all the way up until this stitch marker. If you're following along with the written pattern, you will see how many inches you need to seam. These are totally adjustable as well so that you can kind of seam and get the right fit depending on what kind of neckline you want. So you'll just want to seam up until those points for the front and the back panel, and we're going to leave this part open for the neckline, which you can easily adjust. I like to seam from the bottom of my panel up, so if I try it on when I'm done, I can easily take out stitches to get the neckline to fit exactly how I want. So let me go ahead and show you how to seam your panels together. Okay, so I left a long tail at the end of this panel. So if you haven't done that, that's fine. Just go ahead and grab a long piece of yarn and thread it onto a blunt tapestry needle. And then I like to use the invisible seam, but I kind of just start by joining the bottom edges of the panels together with like a quick little whip stitch here. And then I'll show you how I'm going to kind of go, I guess, through the bars of my stitches. So I'm going to try to get as close to the edge as possible. You kind of have to like turn your panel a little bit, and then you can kind of see here are 2 of the I-cord stitches, 1, 2. I'm going to go kind of between them and pick up the bar in between them, just like this, and then pull my needle through and pull my yarn through. And then almost like the mattress stitch, I'm going to then go to the opposite side, find the next 2 stitches along the edge, and insert my needle so that it's going through the bars of the stitches, not into like the little V part of the stitch, basically. And I'm just going to continue to go back and forth between the panels like this, similar to the mattress stitch, but instead of going through the top part of the stitches, I'm going through the bars. Oh man. Here's a giant knot, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out real quick, and then I'll keep showing you how to seam your panels together. Okay, now that the knot's out of the way, I can continue to show you. This takes some practice, but if you just kind of open up your stitches and kind of turn your panel outward facing you, try to get that last row of V stitches that you see along the edge of your panel is where you kind of want to be working. So we are going to have a little bit of a salvaged edge on the inside of our cover up when we're done from doing this. But as I go, you can see that this is basically almost an invisible seam. You're not really going to really be able to tell. It's almost going to look like your panels did before you had a drop stitch in there. Similar to that. So where we were making our knit through the back loop, knit 1, knit through the back loops, prior to dropping the stitch, that's what this will look like in between your lacy V panels. So just continue on working from the bottom ends into where your stitch markers are that have marked where your back and front panels should end or start. And then once you get the back seamed and the front seamed, I recommend trying it on and seeing if you're liking the fit. Kind of pull it down and bring those bottom edges together, and you can see, okay, does my neckline seem too tight? Do I need to loosen it in the back or the front? And then you can easily just pull out a couple of your seam stitches to get exactly the right fit that you want. You want to have about 10 to 11 inches unworked for your neckline. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep seaming up my back panel, and then I will do the front and we'll be ready to join the sides together. Okay, so you can see here that I have seamed my back and my front, and I've left this space open here for my neckline. This is the perfect time to try on your piece to see if you like where the neckline fits, and you can always take out some seaming stitches if needed. So what we're going to do is we are going to bring this cover up, we're going to fold it in half, and we're going to be placing the wrong sides together. So here I folded my cover up. Here is the front with the longer V stitch. I've got my ends lined up together, wrong sides together, and now we're going to be marking where we are going to be seaming up the sides. So we're going to need to leave a space open from the fold down for our armholes. Then we're going to seam down and leave about 10 inches from the bottom up unworked, so that we have a nice slit in our cover up as well. So we're only going to be seaming part of the side, not the whole thing. So I would measure 10 inches up from the bottom and put a stitch marker there. And then depending on what size you're making, you're either going to mark 9, 10, or 11 inches from the fold down to mark where your armhole will be. And then you just seam in between those 2 points to finish up, and you will be ready to wear your new Cali Cover Up. So yeah, you can see here is the interior seam. It's a great spot for weaving in your ends. And again, I haven't woven mine in yet because just in case I want to make adjustments to the neck after I seam the sides, I can do that as well. So go ahead, seam your sides, weave in all your ends, and you'll be ready to rock your new Cali Cover Up. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. Again, you can find the written pattern on my blog or the PDF in my shop, as well as a full kit from Lion Brand Yarn. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.